Between 1859 and 1930, global oil extraction began an exponential climb as the industry tapped increasingly massive reserves across the planet. Over that exact same period, the global price of crude plummeted. The more oil the world extracted, the more its market value collapsed. Most geopolitical analysis treats oil as a magical, scarce resource. This commodity determinism assumes that the power of the industry stems from the natural rarity of the liquid itself. But the reality is entirely different. The early global oil industry actually faced a structural threat from a chronic, market-destroying abundance. Early American landscapes prove this reality. Haphazard clusters of wooden derricks crowded single fields, with hundreds of independent owners engaged in uncoordinated, frantic extraction. Oil's power resides in the corporate architectures specifically engineered to restrict this abundance. Capitalist accumulation relies on dense, portable fossil fuels to power mechanization and accelerate the circulation of commodities across space and time. In the 1880s, the American ad qualum doctrine fractured subsurface mineral ownership into thousands of tiny surface plots, granting every landowner rights to what lay directly beneath their feet. Unlike coal or iron, crude oil is a fugitive resource. It flows fluidly beneath property lines, often sitting in single, unified reservoirs that span multiple surface owners. The legal rule of capture granted ownership to whoever pumped the oil first. If one well began draining a shared pool, the surrounding neighbors watched their potential wealth physically disappear. This created a rational incentive for maximum extraction. Every owner pumped as fast as possible to prevent their neighbor from stealing the shared pool. The U.S. legal framework made it impossible to control crude at the point of extraction, guaranteeing a structural cycle of overproduction and price crashes. In 1870, John D. Rockefeller realized that the chaotic, overproducing market of independent drillers was inherently unprofitable. Rockefeller pivoted his strategy away from the upstream sector of extraction to focus entirely on midstream and downstream. Vertical integration allowed Standard Oil to monopolize the infrastructure that circulates the commodity, pipelines, tankers, and refineries, effectively creating a chokehold on the industry. Downstream control required industrial infrastructure on a massive scale, turning the physical movement of oil into a barrier that kept smaller competitors out. To manage this integrated empire, Rockefeller's team developed the Standard Oil Trust and later the New Jersey Holding Company model to bypass state-level anti-competition laws. These legal structures unified disparate operations into a single, centrally planned entity capable of setting the final market price for the world. The vertically integrated corporation was a specific architectural weapon invented to tame abundance and suppress the wildcatters. World War I drove a massive demand shock as global navies transitioned from coal to lighter, faster oil-burning ships. The mechanization of ground warfare, from tanks to motorized transport, permanently tied military supremacy to petroleum logistics. The U.S. government intervened to protect these vital supply lines, granting the industry unprecedented financial subsidies, like the oil depletion allowance, to underwrite the costs of exploration. By the 1920s, the explosion of the automobile transformed oil into a mass-market household commodity. But the industry faced a new existential crisis as massive new reserves were discovered simultaneously in East Texas, Venezuela, and the Middle East. The sheer volume of these new discoveries threatened to collapse the U.S. domestic market under the weight of cheap foreign crude. The U.S. used the leverage of its massive domestic market to force European colonial powers to allow American firms into Middle Eastern oil fields. This forced entry created the Iraq Petroleum Company, governed by the 1928 Red Line Agreement, which restricted individual firms from competing for new concessions. That same year, the world's largest oil firms secretly signed the Acne-Carry Agreement to freeze their market shares and halt the construction of any new redundant infrastructure. To fix global prices, they implemented the Gulf Plus system. If a barrel of oil originated in the Middle East and was sold in Europe, the buyer was charged as if that barrel had been shipped from the Gulf of Mexico. This forced low-cost Middle Eastern oil to match the high price of expensive Texas crude. The cartels pocketed the artificial margin for transatlantic shipping that never occurred, a profit stream known as phantom freight. Rival empires and competing corporations divided the world market to aggressively cap Middle Eastern output and protect the American domestic market from collapse. On a global scale, Rockefeller's original strategy evolved into a narrow bottleneck controlled by the Seven Sisters. Western oil majors entered the Middle East to stall drilling and cap the wells, acting as an industrial valve against global overproduction. Oil's geopolitical dominance is a highly engineered social and corporate relation. Understanding the fossil economy requires focusing on the legal and infrastructural chokeholds built to control the circulation of abundance.